Well, there are theories that the government used mind control on this town back in the 60s.
Edred came to West Virginia. He hitchhiked his way across the Ohio. Bought himself a big black car, blew some minds near and far. Said, hey, bud, flying high with the Mothman. Said, hey, pal, flying high with the Mothman. From way up in the canyon, acting like some kind of Charlie Manson, but he never lost his cool, making ultra-terrestrials drool. Hey, bud, flying high with the Mothman. Said, hey, pal, flying high with the Mothman. Came to the TNT, got some phone calls from the CIA. Bigfoot scat was something to fear, aliens coming up the rear. Said, hey, squids, flying high with the Mothman. Said, hey, Biggs, flying high with the Mothman.
What's been going on lately is, to create more PTSD for me, I guess, Dr. Bill. I guess I'll start with my personal and then maybe ask you how you could generalize this into other things. Because that's really what it is for me. I know what's going on with people, groups, and how they're manipulating things, and I've never really bought into it. It still causes me stress, though. Like when you hear from, like my wife works for a big pension fund, and I know this is going on all over the country right now. These MAGAs in the, well, it's for a union, right? And the union members are dumb, and they get tricked into supporting the wrong things all the time. And they're being tricked by Trumpsters who want to get at the money. They want to either get at the union's, whatever fund or pension fund or whatever. And now they're trying to get on the boards of these. They're trying to get on the boards of them so they can divert the money to other places. And it's just total stupid lies, all of it. And they've got a couple people in the newspaper that will lie for them. And basically, out of 500,000 people that are in the union, maybe 100 are causing trouble. So, small percentage of people with that don't understand what's going on, being emboldened by recent events with Trump, into doing all these things in public to grind the system to a halt. And they don't even know why they're being manipulated. They're screaming about stuff that they believe, while the guys pulling the puppet strings above, who know it's bullshit, just keep feeding them that stuff so that they can get at the money. And it's like it's always been this way, it's always been this way, but it's still disheartening. And the way it works, and it's kind of like the basic activity there is people channel their rage. They project it. And I was telling my wife when I was in the Buddhist group my mentor had recognized that I had a pattern of when I would build up whatever anger over my job situation, and I've had a lot of bad jobs, and or people causing trouble like that for the wrong, totally stupid, wrong reasons in the workplace, blocking you from doing anything good or helpful or making stuff better. And they've been there blocking your way the whole time. And I would get angry and stuff. And he was like, well, you need to recognize the cycle. And that's all you'll need to do. And that's true. The minute you recognize the cycle, it stops. And you also, of course, if you're meditating, you start realizing that it's your own anger and you let it dissolve rather than project it on someone else. So this is how the whole population is being used today. Whatever excess anger they've got in the morning from whatever happened yesterday, the media can channel toward a selected enemy, and the person never really deals with their own issue. So this is happening in the paranormal, of course, and I think a lot of it was kind of experimented on in the paranormal world because there's no rules and nobody's really paying attention. It's like, let's try. This is what Roger Stone did during the election. He got in there and used the groups to manipulated them. And one of the guys that he manipulated has been making life hell for me for 5 years because the guy believes in all the Margaret Q stuff and basically just makes up lies. They're committing trauma. They're using trauma. This is a trauma-based program that the right wing is using. Anyway, and I see it in my own life. If we get into any details, we can. So I did want to ask you what you thought about that particular thing. Did I state it as a question?
I think so. I mean, as you were talking,
Dr. Bill, what would you suggest for traumatized witnesses and real researchers in the field who, as you said earlier, are flummoxed by the stupidity and amount of podcasting and stuff that's totally uninformed?
Well, I think that there's a lot that's out there, in terms of commercialism, and as we've found in things that we've looked at, mutually together and even independently, that there's a lot of showmanship. There are a lot of people that are out there selling sensationalism, which is fun. I'll be the first to admit, I had a friend call me the other night, a good friend of mine for the last 15 years, and he was coming home here where we live in Northern Illinois. He saw a number of lights in the sky, and it totally freaked him out. He's like, what the heck is that? He took pictures of it, and then he sent them to me, and I saw these texts, and I didn't know what they were at first because they were mostly blackness. And, in my text feed, I'll see different texts from people that have words in them or clear-cut pictures or, little icons that my mom sends me that my daughter made for her. Avatars, I guess, not icons, but avatars. And then I saw these two dark lights, one of which had almost looked like a fire burning in the lower left-hand corner. And the other one looked like a straight line of stuff. And I just didn't know what it was, but he had texted me after that. He said, you got time to talk. So I called him. And this is a friend of mine who's not really much of a talker. He's more of a texter. But I got him live on the phone, and he was telling me about having seen these lights, and they were all in sequence, and they were like a parallel line, basically, of these different lights. And they were only about 200 yards above him, he thought. And as he was driving, and he got out and took a picture of them, thought he was taking a video, but it turned out to only be pictures. He has a new phone, and he wasn't sure what he was doing. But they started blinking off and turning different colors, and then poof, they were gone. And so we immediately, and I texted him back and said, Starlink, these are Elon Musk's satellites that are out there, but he wasn't really familiar with that. And then Jackie and I talked about it a little bit more. And then we got him on the phone and just said, hey, Mike, these are probably satellites. So we went to the website for that type of thing. And sure enough, over DeKalb County, where we live here in Northern Illinois, you could see them in DeKalb, which is like 10 miles away from where Mike actually saw these things. But the reason I'm sharing this as an example is because here's something that's definitely provable, but I think because we don't know what it is, we want to sensationalize it. It's outside of our scope of what reality is, at least what we see on a normal basis. And then the first thing is, oh my gosh, I got to call this friend of mine who's really into UFOs. So he gets a hold of me. We talk about it, and actually we kind of talked him down from the ledge and let him realize that, hey, these are Starlink satellites that are going by. This is nothing unidentified. It's only identified to you because you weren't aware of what it was. But I think the human mind, in a lot of ways, wants to magnify those things, turn them into sensationalism. And I think where sensationalism lives, commercialism lives also. And I think that that's what we see in the paranormal field today, primarily is commercialism and sensationalism.
The human eye, if it sees three lights in the sky, it will form a triangle and imagine that there's a solid middle to it. Mind does all kinds of things like that.
Well, the mind doesn't tolerate ambiguity well. You know, we always want to complete a mental picture of something we see. So what do? We fill in the blanks with things that are either within our experience or what we hope they might be.
Which I tried not to do with my sighting in 73, which looked like something oozing out of a tree or something, and then becoming a shape, that stickman thing, then floating toward me. But as it floated, it looked like the leaves were moving. So it actually was physically affecting the environment somehow.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think I have written anything else into it. Hopefully, I just ran. So,
and I've read that. I'm familiar with that. I know that's in one of your double trilogies. I want to say it's in Mothman Speaks or Mothman Shrieks, if I remember right, where you first mentioned that.
Yeah, well, I don't know exactly where. I mentioned the bear. I don't know what that was a track I found in TNT. I think Captain Slack thinks it's a huge bear that's around there, but I don't know. I guess it is. But he said something, because I had listed a bunch of these serendipitous things that had happened where I met musicians in my life, or some things, the weird things that happened as a musician. And I guess my story has to do with my overall is things that happened when I was young, sort of, I don't know if it programs you or something, but to be open and let serendipity happen kind of thing. And I've never forced situations, because part of it is the idea of doing nothing. So that was my main religious thing, I guess, was do nothing or try to be neutral, I guess. And that turned into the whole Slack and subgenius thing. I said to him that I thought Slack was I developed it because of him, because of a person, not because of an activity. And I wanted to say this on the air somewhere so that he gets credit for that, because he had this way of approaching life that was very sort of courageous and humble at the same time, and sort of a natural born leader who became a ship captain on the Mississippi, Ohio rivers and stuff. So a very good leader type guy, who actually worked hard. So I do think you have to work, but you can use elements of Slack to get out of it. That was my main reason for developing it, was because I, from the working class, had to start working very early in my life. I hated every minute of it. And I thought there's got to be a way out of this without working myself to death. And so what are those ways? Those ways are Slack. Whatever way you can find to move forward, get around the blockage, ooze through to the next level or something. And there's little principles you can use, which I'm getting off track, I know. I don't know. Was I supposed to end up at Slack?
No, I think this is good, because when you're talking about this, I've got a number of different things, different ideas that are coming to mind from my own experience. And the first one I wanted to share with you was, when I was younger, I was a big Stephen King fan, and I segued over from horror into his Dark Tower series. And in the Dark Tower series, which is about Roland of Gilead, the gunslinger, those 8 books are all about, it's really science fiction meets Western, meets a little elements of horror and macabre, but it's really like a science fantasy thing. And one of the things he talks about in those books is being on the beam. And being on the beam means that you're basically, it's kind of like when you're in an airport, and instead of just walking, you're on top of that conveyor belt and you're walking. So something is helping you move along. The second thing that popped into my head as you were talking about Slack is something that you're probably familiar with, and that's the Buddhist concept of the wind horse. And this is something that was brought to me by a mentor who I've held in confidence for going on 30 years. And he was explaining to me that in an earlier job that I had, all the things that I had done in order to basically build a sales pipeline and build relationships and do the right things by my customers and be aggressive, but at the same point in time, not to the point that I'm pushy, but still focused and diligent and a humble servant for the most part, but suiting up and showing up and helping my customers. And all of a sudden the lid just blew off of my territory, and I had the best year in my career. And he explained to me when I was kind of bouncing the ideas off of him, like, where did this come from? He says, you've been working for it for your whole life. He said, all those elements are coming together, and the Buddhist concept of the wind horse is happening. You're on this horse and this wind is blowing you, kind of like that conveyor belt that I was talking about in the airport, where you're not just going by your own propulsion, but you've got basically the universe pushing you right along with it. So when you were talking about the concept of Slack, those are the ideas that hit me.
That's interesting. The wind horse. I wonder, I remember people talking about that in the Buddhist group. There was a publishing house called Wind Horse, which I believe the priests in my lineage write on. They like publish through them. But what it reminds me of is the Garuda, because the Garuda flies around at crisis moments, and it carries someone called Jaci. And I guess somehow Jay turns into the bigger deity, Vishnu, maybe, I think. And then Vishnu does a little reconstruction of whatever's been destroyed. I get these, there's so many that go by that I miss. I don't document them. Just these little ideas. This one has to do with, well, they're things that I do. And so every now and then I'll realize something about my own process and wonder if that could be helpful for others. And this I call the change ripple effect. Let's say you don't want to quit smoking. Well, instead of that, if you don't really feel like doing that at the moment, you try stop drinking coffee instead, or change something about your daily routine. Start going to the gym, even though if you don't do much there, just sort of go. And so this is often how I get back in shape. After I've been out of shape, I'll just go to the gym and I'll just kind of shoot baskets and not really work out. The main point is to go there every day. And then once you go there every day, then you start doing other things while you're there. But this can play out in other ways. If we're dealing with MAGAs and crazy right-wingers in the paranormal field who are not going to stop, or in business, what do you do? Well, how can you change that? That's not you're changing. You're trying to change someone else, which seems impossible. One way you can do that is, yeah, I'm going to switch to basketball for a moment because I have a lot of basketball analogies about things. And sometimes you go after the third guy. You don't go after the first guy. Like you don't have to take down the number one guy. You can shoot for smaller targets, because if that group is really acting as a group, as a whole, they're kind of a group think entity, which a lot of these groups have become. If you can just pull out a little thing here or there, if you can just neutralize a couple of things, it can change the whole dynamic and kind of bring it down. Just a suggestion for anybody out there who wants to let's say you want to post on social media, and somebody says, Andy, what are you talking about? You can post on social media. Yeah, I can post on my own page, but I literally cannot post on any other groups now. I am blocked from every group. I cannot post on any of them. They will block it, make up lies about why it was blocked. And it's extended to YouTube. So I go to the Newkirks do a clown episode. And I've been in contact with Connor recently. As I mentioned in Mothman's Photographer 22, I haven't gotten an answer yet from him. He's just ignoring me. But they do this clown episode, which really was kind of informative. I mean, they do bring up historical stuff that you can learn more about clowns and stuff. And I thought I'm going to give them kudos for that. And they're pretty entertaining. So after the show, I posted a link to they mentioned my book in the show, or they didn't mention my book, they mentioned the evil clown sightings of 2016, the scary ones where all the people got arrested, or a few of them did. And it was like a clown panic. Anyway, I published a book on that subject, and it's just straightforward. There's no political anything in it. And yet they took the post down. They literally won't let me advertise something on one of their shows that actually has something to do with the subject at hand, and is the only book on it. They purposely went around mentioning the book and went and found some things on the web to show instead. So they already had decided not to, this is all conscious. I know they're doing it. So then they immediately smacked me down the minute I put that link up. And I'm thinking, that's really says a lot, because it says you're petty. You're not open to regular old debate, like the old thing where people have their say. You're totally controlling what's coming in and out of your ecosystem, they call it. This is after I let them use some of my footage of John Keel in their movie for free. They never even said thank you.
But aren't they all just being trained to do that by someone?
What's that?
Aren't they all just being trained to do that by someone? Because
yeah, it seems like there's a pattern of shoot down. You've got your selected target. On the one hand, you shoot them down, but on the other hand, you ride on their coattails if necessary. So if you, like for instance, with my Keel compilations, Steve Ward has read all those and uses the information all the time, but he actually dissuades people from reading them. That's so he can monopolize the information.
I'm talking specifically about, the Hellier people, but also about the Chicago Mothman stuff. They're controlling the narrative. Yeah. 3 specific people are controlling the narrative there. And who's controlling them for that to happen? I mean... Right.
Well, they came in at the same time, and I noticed they both had that Patreon stuff all figured out, like at the very outset. And it's like somebody decided, hey, let's do Patreons for paranormal research. Nobody was doing that. And then there it is. And they all end up being in the Lauren Coleman camp.
I wasn't even familiar with the terminology until we watched PhenomenaCon a couple of years ago, because at that point in time, we were really following what was going on in Hellier. It was a well-done series. It was. I mean, kudos to them. They did a very nice job. The production as well. It was put together well. It was scripted. Towards the end of the second season, things went a little bit awry with me. And towards the end of the whole show, I began questioning, really the legitimacy of the whole thing. That's not to say there's not some legitimate elements to it. And that's not to say that I'm trying to be critical of it. This is just the way that I saw it. And what I'm getting at is that I'd never heard the term Patreon before, but you're right. That's something that since that time happened, or since that happened there, I've seen it multiple places with different researchers that are making their mark in the field.
We heard about it before that, didn't we? Amanda told us to start a Patreon. Or did we watch Hellier before all of that?
I think Hellier was the example. At least in my mind, Hellier was the example of a Patreon. I remember hearing that, quote unquote, we should do that after that, not before that.
Okay.
Well, what's happening with these, I think they were developed or were used for funneling dark money to these researchers. These researchers now can totally outspend everybody else. And you don't know who's donating that money. It's dark money. I wouldn't accept it.
Well, you've been able to create a very good business doing some really interesting things over the last couple of decades. And you've done it, ostensibly on your own money. So you've been able to finance New Saucerian and any related publications you've done as a result of that with nobody else's money, as far as I know.
Right.
So to see some of these other folks that are getting out there and being, in the media, which, hey, you know what? They're doing it. I'm not trying to be critical here, but they're out there and they're making things happen. And they have a fan base that's basically financing them, whether they need the financing or not. You're seeing some people making some really good money with entertainment. It's really entertainment. It's not true research.
Absolutely.
They're two totally different industries.
Absolutely.
And the sad thing is so many people don't understand that, and they're being fooled by these people. That's why they don't want you, Andy, to post.
And we know that at least half of the people on social media are bots. So a lot of them could be bots. And certainly if the CIA wants to promote any of these people or some other agency like the Space Force, they could just channel all that money and then have a fan base there that appears to be real, but isn't really as large as it seems. That's what I think.
And when you were talking about a few minutes ago with Facebook and people taking things down, and they won't allow anything that challenges them to be publicized or what have you. That's really more of a symptom of what we see in our society today when it comes to social media in general. And I'm thinking in terms of 2016, when politics changed entirely from what it was in the past, and the Republicanism and the Democratic Party, and just, I guess, what I grew up with and understanding what the two parties were about totally turned on its ear in 2016, and everything became just totally sensationalized. And so I guess we talk about 2016, we talk about the paranormal community, but then if you take that, and if it's just a microcosm compared to what's going on in the political spectrum in this country in general, isn't it just a symptom? Isn't it just a symptom of what was happening within the country and politics anyway? The polarization of America?
Well, yeah, I think, and it started with cable TV, and when they started covering Newt Gingrich on C-SPAN, and he used that opportunity to just go on these long rants and lay out a real template that's still being used. And then cable TV made everything about the election of the president. They started covering it more and more and more, until now it eats up about 2 years in a row. Then you have maybe a year off. Then you have a year of the midterms, and then 2 more years. So 3 out of the 4 years we're being bombarded with election crap.
Yep.
And that consists of nothing but people slinging lies, or the right slinging lies at the left, and the left trying to, be normal or deal with it or something. And they're starting to realize they have to fight back, I think. I don't know. It's like you're being asked to play dirty if you want to be in the game. And a lot of people don't want to do that. They want to be in the game and not be dirty, and not try to steal stuff all the time and make up lies about your competition, which I wonder if in the paranormal world, if you're somebody who's in business and one of these people attack you, or let's say they're doing it in a group and they're sending messages around, oh, well, let's keep so-and-so off of our list. That way they can't make money. Well, that's actually racketeering if it's done over interstate lines. And what people don't realize is that when you've got a weak link, say like Steve Ward, he's a weak link. He reveals too much about his right-wing position. He goes way too far with the lies he makes up, and he's a sitting duck. So let's say someone sued him for libel or slander. And it was thought that this was happening across state lines, and it did involve substantial loss of money. A judge might decide to subpoena the records, the social media records of their friends, of the person's friends. So if you're out there right now communicating with, say, Steve Ward and getting involved in these ridiculous lies and stuff, you're opening yourself up to total exposure of all the things you've been doing. And who would be able to withstand the pressure of what their private messages have been saying for 10 or 15 years? I mean, it would be devastating for most people. I mean, can you imagine? I try to make sure when I write a private message that it's going to be read, right? So I keep it clean. And I try to do that in my post too. Yep, I said that, and I'll defend it. But a lot of people aren't doing that. They're saying one thing and doing another.
I very much, personally work, and I know we've talked about this in the past, to be very innocuous with things that I post in social media and my communications with people. And I'm by nature a very non-confrontational person who gets along with everybody, and it doesn't make a big difference to me as to what people believe or think or practice, so long as it's not being offensive to me or people that I'm close to, then I kind of let most of those things go personally. That's, I think, one of the things in our society today, as it's gotten more and more polarized, that we see a lot more of this spitballing and just people taking shots at each other. And I think what's unfortunate is that rather than having any kind of a dialogue where problems can be solved between parties, maybe parties that are, let's just use politics as an example, Republican versus Democrat, are the people really that far apart in their ideologies, or do they really try to tribally get so connected to people that they take their identification from and then band together and then play in-group, out-group? And a lot of that goes back to tribal survival tactics that are really rooted in things that we're not even conscious of. Jackie and I have been watching the TV show Young Sheldon for the last couple of months, and I just love the show. It's got really pretty positive message. It's pretty clean. It's not nasty. People aren't like getting up in each other's businesses and making a big ruckus of things. And it's got really pretty good values. But even Sheldon, this young kid who turns into the guy that's on The Big Bang Theory, this really eccentric, genius level kind of guy who looks down on pretty much everybody else, but is kind of socially ostracized because of who he is, realizes how good it feels when you are in group. And one of the episodes we watched last night, he basically is given a dorm room at the university that he's attending as an 11-year-old or a 12-year-old with all these other college kids that are 18, 19, 20 years old. And he starts basically saying, hey, you can use my dorm room while I'm not here. You can study, because in his mind, he's a 12-year-old genius kid. And here he's basically renting his room out or loaning his room out to kids that are going in there and sleeping together. Is what's going on. But he doesn't know this. He's just basically being a nice guy and realizing it feels good to be that nice guy. What's difficult is when you're the guy that's on the outside of that, and you're the one that's really trying to really stand for what you believe in and trying to do right by people and trying to practice, correct moral living and that type of a thing. And for whatever reason, things get pulled out of context and things get ugly when they don't really need to. It's maddening. It is. It's maddening.
May I take this moment to show you the 3 orange cameras I bought today?
Sure. Yeah, why not?
This is how I made myself feel better. Is that okay to do, Dr. Bill? Is it okay to shop?
You can do whatever you want to do.
And you don't need my approval. They're old cameras, but they're orange. And I love this orange color that they used to use in 2012. So I bought all the orange cameras from the different camera makers of that time period, because the one I have been using all these years, the Canon, is my favorite camera. Even though it's not highfalutin or anything, it doesn't have great resolution. It's a camera that works for me. Here's another Nikon Cool Pix. This is a little beefier. I believe this has a bigger chip in it.
Where'd you find these?
Oh, eBay. They're pretty cheap. $50, $75. In their day, they were, pretty expensive, I would imagine.
Sure.
2012.
We took a trip down to Mexico back, when was that? 2007? It was a company trip. The employer that I had at the time, it's a performance oriented trip. And I was able to go on the President's Club trip, and Jackie was able to come with, and we went down to Chichen Itza, and we were touring the pyramids there, and Jackie got really ill, and we were in 100-degree weather with 100% humidity.
I was sick when we left.
She was very sick when we were very sick. And as we came back on the plane, she was totally disoriented, and I was doing what I could to take care of the luggage, which is the last place you want me to be. I mean, she's the details one in the family. She's the brains of the operation.
I literally put my camera in my suitcase because I didn't want to carry it on, and you weren't going to help me with anything because you were mad that I was sick. That's the true story.
Well, this sounds like a good time, and we're at the top of the hour, to remind our listeners that you're listening.
Anyway, somebody stole my camera, Andy.
You're listening to the first ever episode of Mothy Talk. Mothy Talk, if you don't know it, as a discussion list, has been around since 2006. We've had a lot of heavy hitters in the group over the years. The Mothy Talk is a legendary group of hard-hitting JFK researchers, those types. But before the big changeover when we went to podcasters. So anyway, we're trying to get back in the game a little bit by having our own podcast, and we're glad you're here with us. So we have as our guest Dr. Bill Kousoulas and his wife Jackie, an experiencer of many things. Has anything happened recently, Jackie, that you want to tell us about? I know you've been having some things in the house.
Yeah, but I'm just wondering, did you guys hear that growling voice a little while ago come over this? Or did I only hear that?
That happens a lot. I mean, it's happened 2 or 3 times with me over the years.
I mean, just earlier on this, though. It should be on the recording.
It should be, and I think it happened last time.
Yeah, so.
Got a disembodied growl.
Yeah.
Some weird voices that sound like they're coming from a radio. I for some reason, I'm thinking of my brother's recent experience where he moved into this house in Charleston recently, and the mail kept getting sent back. And he asked the postman about it. Postman goes, "Well, I came here and the lady signed for it and said to send your mail back." And he's like, "What lady?" And he described the lady, and then Chip asked the neighbors and stuff, and it turns out to be the lady that had died there earlier. So she literally came to the door and signed, a ghost literally signed something, and Chip tracked down the piece of paper. There's actually a signature on it. There's a scratch or something.
I remember you telling us about that.
And I just think that's one of the most incredible things. And they recently told me they were driving nearby. This is East Charleston near Kanawha City. And suddenly the sound in the car went away, and they couldn't hear each other, like they're yelling and they can't hear the other person. And the pressure changed and everything, and they felt like they were in another dimension.
Wow.
And Loretta said she told Chip to calm down because it would pass, because she's kind of knows these things somehow, having had a lot of experiences. And sure enough, it went away. And then I told her she needed to watch Twin Peaks, because there's the end of Twin Peaks involves something like that. So I think she's going to discover Twin Peaks. She really liked the X-Files. This is a woman who's been offline forever, and suddenly she found the X-Files, and she's like, "Oh, this stuff, Andy, this is the stuff that was happening." I'm like, yeah they got the stuff from the stuff that I was writing in the early 90s and used some of those in there. And it freaked me out at the time really badly, because I didn't know what was going on with that. I just felt like maybe everybody in the world was having the same thing I was having.
I started writing things down now because I'm trying to see if it makes sense at all of some of the stuff that's going on here, but nothing really makes sense.
It's been really strange too. Go ahead.
A couple of days ago, I was in the basement, And we have two cats they live in the basement. And one of them was on the other side of the basement, laying on Bill's office chair. And the other cat was right near me, eating from her food dish. And I was facing the wall doing some stuff on one of my tables. And I heard what sounded like a bead drop from up high and bounce across the floor.
Oh, wow. That's I've heard of that before.
And I looked all over and I can't find the bead anywhere, which doesn't mean anything because we just moved in here and it's kind of still messy down there. But I went right away to look to make sure that ZB was still where she was, and she was. So I'm not sure what that was about. And then the other day I was in our spare bedroom and we have a massage chair in there. And I was just like moving some things around in the closet in the massage chair. It massages, and then when it gets done, it makes like this wind down noise, like it's resetting itself or something. It made that noise. It wasn't on, it wasn't massaging, but it made the noise like it had just completed a cycle. So I've never heard it do that before either. That was kind of strange. The electronics, I think, are messing with us. Alexa's doing a lot of weird shit. And I went into the app, and there's like voice commands in there that you can look to see who said what to make it do whatever it does. And there's all kinds of different places where the voice is not recognizable. It can't interpret what's being said.
Is that what's going on?
That's what it says. Yeah.
So it's almost like something is actually commanding it outside of us.
Well, yeah, but we don't hear it because it'll just start telling us stuff.
We also experience disembodied barking. Now, Jackie and I have two lab puppies that are 70 and 80 pounds each now. They're about 9 months old, and they sleep in our bedroom with us in their kennels. So the four of us will be in the bedroom together, basically, and we will hear a disembodied barking sound coming from the other side of the house. Jackie and I hear it. The dogs do not. And so as I'm hearing you talk about this bead falling from the ceiling, I'm thinking this is something that you're conscious of, but the cats are not.
Well, Goose didn't stop eating, and ZB was still sitting in the chair. So,
and they have heightened senses compared to what humans are. So for whatever reasons, whatever these things that are going on in this brand new house, which nobody's ever lived in before, we're picking up things, we're hearing things, and they're not batting an eye. We have four animals.
The voice is what scares me the most. The two different times that we heard voices scares me the most.
The first story reminds me of something I saw when I was working on The Big Bamboozle, which is a John Keel compilation that's going to be coming out. It sort of summarizes the whole bamboozling that goes on in ufology and the paranormal. There was a case of trying to remember where they lived. It may have been India, but there were balls dropping from the ceiling, inside the ceiling. They were literally they were forming under the ceiling and dropping. And you could stand there and watch it. And a lot of people did. And there's no explanation for it. Like it's like moisture congealing out that's thick enough to turn into something solid and drops or something. What process is at work there? It's very strange.
I'd be curious to know if everybody perceived that or only a select few who were there.
I don't know. I think it just said a lot of people had seen it and it had become a tourist attraction for a while until it stopped.
Jackie has seen things that I've not been able to see when we stood right next to each other, some things that were happening in the sky. Now, this one disembodied voice that we heard in our basement, we both heard plain as day. And it sounded exactly, to me, it sounded like a police scanner. And people who were just like saying something unintelligible, I couldn't make out. She interpreted it differently than I did.
Well, and then the other day, whenever I put the dogs in their kennels in the afternoon so they can take a nap, I always play Alexa, and I have Alexa play meditation music. And
here's a station you might like. Meditation on Amazon Music.
And the Alexa stop. And you know, remember what Gremlins sounded like on the movie The Gremlins? Like some kind of weird cackly, creepy noise.
I do.
So when I started out, when the music was supposed to be starting, that's what started. And I'm like, what the hell? That's not meditation. I mean, that's not soothing or it's not comforting or anything. You wouldn't put that in a song, I didn't think. But then the music started playing. And then a little, like within 15 seconds or so, it started doing it again. And Ellie barked at it. She barked at the Alexa. And then the music started again. And I waited maybe 30 seconds or so, and it just kept playing music. So I walked out of the room and just left the dogs in there. But I kind of scratched my head at that too. It's like, that was just freaking weird.
Mm-hmm.
I've got a category. Well, this is something random from today, talking to Lisa. I'm editing this multi-slacker video. Basically my life since I could start filming things in the mid-'80s. But with the principles of Slack explained and lots of paranormal stuff and that was happening. It really, the Mothman's photographer is kind of in the middle of it. So, and this is, I may actually re-edit the Mothman's photographer from the real tapes. The one that's out there now is from a messed up transfer. It's got bad sound and stuff. So I might re-edit it into the multi-slacker. If it happens, it would end up being 100 hours maybe, or is that, no, be more, it'd be 80 episodes probably of 2 hours each. So that's how much material I'm working with. This is stuff that was going to be in Slacker, that movie that we all know and love. And the parts that they took that I had come up with were the beginning and the end and the middle. The beginning is where you're driving into Austin and you're coming in from out of town. And I actually filmed all this footage of me leaving West Virginia and driving to Texas and coming into town and stuff. And then you meet all these weird people. And if you're going to study them like an ethnologist would, you would simply film them. You wouldn't even be talking to them. You would just film activity, take it back to the lab and get with your other researchers and study the culture. I mean, you would eventually get around to interviewing them, but the main thrust of ethnographic is you're trying to be a fly on the wall, right? So that's how the movie was done. It is done that way, but he used actors with some pre-written lines as well, which was a nice twist on the whole thing. And his ending ended up at Enchanted Rock, which is where I wanted it to end up. And I actually shot a bunch of footage of me doing this thing. I was carrying a huge chair on my back up in Enchanted Rock. And I was in penance. I didn't have a cross, so I just used a chair, big lounger. And then when I get to the top, what was I going to find there? Well, after I finally did my taxes, up there. I was going to see an angel, right? And the angel was Lisa, my wife. And so I've got all this footage of her looking like an angel up there on the top of the rock and stuff. And I told her, hey, did you know that I found the footage of you being the angel? Because I'm finding all this footage now. Yeah, oh, great. And she's like, yeah, that makes me feel so great. But you're the one who's drop dead gorgeous. Now, I'm not saying this or you used to be drop dead gorgeous. And I'm like, no, I was not. I never perceived myself that way. But she said, that's my whole problem. She thinks that's been my whole problem all along, is that guys get jealous very easily. And if you're in the drop dead gorgeous category, it'd be better like if you became an actor or something, probably, instead of like a loser construction worker. So it got us talking about categories of beauty. I never thought I was gorgeous. I was terrible with girls. I never really got to experience any of that, maybe for a very brief time, any sense of that, of having women being attracted and having one night stands. My life just has not been like that. But somebody mentioned on TV Jordan Peterson again, and he's like, since I'm the most hated man in the paranormal, I can bring up Jordan Peterson because I know I'm going to get attacked anyway, so I can just bring him up. It doesn't matter. He's like the most he's like him and Dave Chappelle are the two most, if you bring either of those up, you're going to get in trouble on social media. Peterson, they claim he's a misogynist. All I've ever heard him say is that he's anti-radical feminist. Like he thinks there's some radical feminists in colleges who are not using the scientific method and how they've come up with some of their ideas. But that's different than being a misogynist to me. If he's right, and it sounds like he is about, how they develop their theories. And so so naturally they've labeled him a misogynist, but the last time he got in trouble had to do with beauty. And he's so like on the spectrum maybe that he doesn't really get. He's sort of like Elon Musk, doesn't really get, like you should never say that a woman is fat. But he said that she wasn't beautiful because she's on the cover of Sports Illustrated and she's a B plus size. And she's there with Elon Musk's mother, in fact, and maybe Fonda.
Jane
Fonda. I think Jane was there. And it's called beauty. Look, people are coming, how beautiful this is. And all he was trying to say is that studies have shown that, and he's a statistics guy, right? Studies show that people do have preferences in what is beautiful and what is not. You can actually measure to some degree where people stand on a beauty scale. And studies have shown, and I've read about them for years. Some of them were like women would rate men from 1 to 10 in desirability. And if a guy was kind of homely, they'd rate him a 3 or 4. And there were certain guys that are in that whatever gorgeous category, supposedly, who get all the action. And they get all the action, like disproportionately, so that guys who are 5s and below never have sex. But if the guy who's a 4 makes a high salary, and that is added into the equation, then he can jump up to an 8, say. There's studies like that, right? And Peterson gets gets called all these horrible things because he's trying to use science in the wrong place. All he was saying was statistically, most men are not going to view her as beautiful. You think about all the beauty stuff that goes on in media, all the flaunting of beauty, and no one ever says stuff like that. No one ever just criticizes it at all in any way.
Well, if you're a kid growing up in today's society, and let's say you're watching television, which I guess there is such a thing as network television anymore. We don't have it because we don't subscribe to any type of service. We do everything through apps these days. But take a TV show that we probably all have seen over the years, like Baywatch or Beverly Hills 90210. You take a look at these kids, these young people that have perfectly chiseled bodies, and they have great complexions and perfect hair. And the girls are wearing their makeup just right. And everything, again, we come back to sensationalism. And then you're a young kid that's growing up and you don't fit that mold for whatever reason, because really nobody does. You've got a select few that are in the media who are getting all this attention. Yet these younger people, and not just younger people, but even older folks, begin to compare themselves to that whatever ideal they think is out there in society. They don't measure up to that. So once again, they think that they're out group when this totally exclusive media type folks are out there. They're not representing reality. They're representing commercialism and sensationalism again.
Now let's take this a little bit deeper. What if this is the workings of our natural minds? Because haven't some animal studies shown that there's a beauty quotient? I believe with rats. The rats who are perceived to be the most beautiful were given way more space to live in and were waited on hand and foot and treated like stars. And I guess it sort of happens with bees and ants too, with the queen.
It does. Well, you've got your queen bee. Your queen bee is catered to by the entire hive, basically the entire society. Your queen ants are the same things. I mean, some of these different species are totally based upon what you're talking about. And you talk about selection of the fittest too. So if you've got the most attractive and coupled with wealth, whether it's in the animal kingdom or whether it's in, the human population or what have you, you're going to have those select few that are going to have those quote unquote rights to be able to reproduce more and more and more and more. And it's genetic in a lot of ways.
So does this mean that what's going on in the paranormal world right now is natural selection? The most beautiful, well-spoken podcasters become the researchers?
I don't know,
No.
Andy. I've seen some pretty ugly researchers out there that have
No.
some pretty big followings.
Oh, really?
Not
Yes.
naming any names.
Well,
My God.
there are a lot of really nasty looking people doing this stuff.
Nasty looking and nasty behaving.
Yes.
Misogynistic.
Has pseudoscience can pseudoscience regain its composure and bring back? Well, what I was shooting for was people that maybe aren't that beautiful, but have something to say. That would be nice,
Mhm.
And
Or
that's
even-
important because I think when you've got educated people who are coming from a place of genuine concern and research and wanting to get a message out that maybe isn't necessarily as popular, but more rooted in the scientific, or rooted in the scientific method, grounded. I guess, combining two words, grounded and rooted in the scientific method, rather than just popular opinion. Whereas, hey, we want to believe that that was a spaceship. Like my friend the other night, he really, in his mind, it scared him half to death, but he wanted to believe at the same point in time. I mean, as a society, fear and belief at the same point in time kind of manifest simultaneously. How many of us like to be scared by horror movies? I mean, a lot of us do.
Yeah. I mean, you're right. These are. I would be a hypocrite if I said I didn't enjoy, whatever pranks. Some of the pranks that people have done, or just, I don't know. If they do a good job at what they're doing, it can be entertaining. I like the use of the drone now in a lot of these documentaries. I think that's a nice step. Makes them nicer to watch. But we're still getting these shows that I'm not buying. Seth Breedlove did one on the coastal Sasquatch. They're in Alaska. So they built this cabin. Nice place, It cost a lot to do, too, probably. And so they're all having tree knocks and rocks thrown and stuff, and it's a Sasquatch, and it's tale after tale after tale, absolutely no different than the Mothman's photographer whatsoever, except the drone shots. But it's the same tales, and you either it comes down to whether you believe those people or not. And I think in that case, it could easily be a scam, sort of like Whitehall was, where you got a small group of people in one spot. There's really no one else to contradict them. So my cousins were involved in that one. I just know that because I know my cousin. I happen to know. But I think this was a similar situation where these guys were pulling his legs, pulling the legs of the small town mobsters. I mean, it's just there's no evidence of anything. Anyway,
yeah,
but he's covering every single cryptid.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
He's going to cover every single cryptid in the same fashion. It's one big thing. I'm sure Lawrence gave him the whole thing of what he should do, and he doesn't really veer off into anything like the Newkirks. So those really are two different animals,
two totally different areas of quote unquote investigation. I mean, I would say basically, I've never been one that's had much of an interest other than passing interest in anything Bigfoot. So I just don't follow it, and I'm not trying to criticize it. That's not where I'm coming from. It just never really grabbed my attention. And being, as a younger person, when I first got exposed to the paranormal, starting out with, understanding aliens and UFOs, that was fascinating. Getting into fantasy and science fiction and those types of things, that was fun. Then turning into horror after a while, Stephen King and then H.P. Lovecraft and things of that nature. Clive Barker was really interesting for a while to me. But then getting away from it, nothing really captured my attention the way Mothman did. And I think the movie itself pulled me in initially. I know that. And then going out and reading Keel's book just blew my mind. And then since reading the Mothman prophecies and getting exposed to the other areas of research that Keel did that weren't so much UFO based, but more what I would call paranormal or ultra terrestrial or extra dimensional or what have you, those are the things that really got me fired up. I've never been a flesh and blood extraterrestrial nuts and bolts kind of guy. I love Keel's ideas about the super spectrum and about the ultra terrestrials and the fact that whatever is here has already been here and always has been here. And I'm not saying that I know this. I'm just saying that that's what's pulled me in. These are the areas of, psychic manifestations coupled with supernatural, coupled with mystique, and then that just tremendous Mothman story is what's always gotten me fired up.
I should add here, I mentioned basketball, but I didn't go on with it. I am going to do a basketball video, though, where I show my shot technique and how I achieve such a high rate of three-pointers made. It's all based in Slack. But in basketball, as I've mentioned probably before, you got to take what the defense gives you. And if the defense has got you locked out like that, of these social media things, the only thing you can do is what we're doing right now, YouTube. So I think that those guys would have been better served arguing with me on social media than having me be on YouTube. It's just a thought. But I'm taking what the defense has given me, guys.
You were talking about Slack and something that just popped into my head, and that was just the concept of letting go. And when I was a little younger than I am now, going back probably, it began in my early 30s, and then really through the course of my 30s and even into my early 40s, I was a league bowler. And I picked up league bowling in my late 20s, and I really wasn't any good then, but it was fun. And I did it with friends. And I remember the first season or two that I bowled, my high average for a season was 148. And then I got a new bowling ball and my average shot up to 161. I remember being really proud of that. And then I went through a part of my life that got pretty dark for a while, but I stuck with bowling. And I bowled with some guys that were better bowlers than I was. But what I started doing, this is going to sound a little hokey to some, but others will understand this. And that is when I went up to the approach, it looked like I was concentrating, but I was not doing that. I was doing the exact opposite of that. I was saying a quick prayer in my head, letting go, and then just letting body mechanics take over and not even being conscious of what I was doing. And in that process and following different bowlers and really getting some better equipment, my bowling average soared from the low to mid 160s up to 190s, over 200 and over 210. And I want to say that all took place in about a 3-year period of time. But it was really a matter of, like you're talking about with Slack and what we were talking about with the whole wind horse concept a while back, but it was a concept of letting go. And I remember there was a guy that used to bowl down the lane from Jackie and me when we were bowling in a mixed follies league, which was really supposed to be more fun than competitive. But he was good. He was a better bowler than I was. And he was a trash talker. And he was the guy that, I would have 2 strikes in a row and then I wouldn't strike on the third one. And he'd say, "Hey, good run, Bill." And usually when people said good run, it's like after you've had 7 or 8 strikes in a row. So he was just trash talking me. But he made the comment that he said, "Why do you take so much time up there on the approach? You're concentrating too much." And it wasn't that. I was emptying my head. I wasn't concentrating. I wasn't going into ultra focus. I was letting go and letting body mechanics take over.
That's a good analogy. I know bowling well, and I believe you really outdid me there. I struggled with it. I think I maybe got up to 170 on average. So I could never I think 259 was my highest game.
She's got you. She's laughing because she got you.
Got me. See, and women beat me and stuff all the time, and I had to accept that a long time ago when I was trying to do like those races and stuff, those marathons. Old ladies would pass me.
I'm the first to say that women think at a higher level than we do, Andy. I say it all the time. And living with my wife just continues to prove that. She thinks and operates at a much different level than I do. And I'm never one to try to think that males are dominant over females. I mean, I was raised by women and kind of was led to believe growing up subconsciously that women were right and men were wrong. So there it is.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, yeah, I think a lot of us probably got that. But the thing about Slack that I wanted to mention was it's not so much about hard work, it's about how you approach the work. So you were approaching it from a Slack perspective, emptying your mind. Now, when I refer back to Captain Slack, his thing was making everything look easy. He just has this natural sort of thing where he seems at ease no matter what's going on. But he still works hard. But that's something you want to bring to whatever you're doing is, I guess you practice it enough that you're at ease, or you still your mind like you do so that you're at ease and you can have that slack and your strings aren't too tight.
I'm not always like that. My wife would be the first to tell you I'm usually pretty high strung in a lot of ways.
Then that's when you turn to magnesium.
Yeah, I've heard that.
And this is where I would have an ad for magnesium. And I could probably look at this. I can grab something right here. give Dr. Carolyn Dean some whatever. Can't read it, can you?
Sometimes it's kind of ghostly, somewhat like those voices we're hearing in our home.
Yeah, it's a Remag balm from Dr. Carolyn Dean, rnareset.com. Their products saved my life. If you're a middle-aged person, you are probably low in magnesium because we're not getting enough of it in our diets. And it causes everything, cancer, heart disease, broken toes. No, I'm just kidding. It does cause most of the major diseases if you don't have enough magnesium. It runs the show. Think about that little thing you burned in science class, a magnesium strip, and how much energy came out of that. Did you ever do that?
It's kind of ringing a
bell. You don't have
but...
to. I don't want to. No, I didn't want it to sound like I was saying anything about your school district.
No, that's fine. That's fine.
Yeah. Right. But
it's funny that you mentioned that, though, because my younger brother said something to me. He sent me a text message the other day, and he said, "Didn't you put frog's eggs from a dissected frog in Mr. Erickson's coffee cup?"
Oh my God! Did you?
And I texted him back, and I said, "That sounds vaguely familiar, but I'm not so sure. I'm not sure that it was me." And he said, "You told me it was you." And I said, "You know what? It probably was me. I don't remember it." And it came back to me. Then I do remember it now.
That had formaldehyde in it. Probably not enough to kill him, but
well, he's dead now. So I wonder if I had an effect on that.
I bet he had a hangover the next day.
Oh, holy cow! I was gonna tell you something too, and that was when we were talking about some of the different things that seem to be happening here in our house. That so this, and Jackie obviously knows this, but on January 4th, I suffered a really traumatic back injury, and involving an ambulance commute to the hospital, and then being dismissed from the hospital and having to go back the same day as the next day when I collapsed for like a third time. But what that's done is between L3 and L4, I have pressure on the disc, which since you and I talked last, I have now learned that the disc was basically, it was exploded, and some of that disc fluid kicked out into my system, and now that disc is basically shot altogether. But all the pressure that was on the nerve has caused sciatica and a condition known as radiculopathy, which sounds really funny and really isn't very funny. It hurts really bad. But the reason I'm mentioning this is that and I don't know how long it was, but I think I was back from the hospital, our black lab, who is really hyper and really motivated and really talkative and really the emotional one of the two puppies we have, I'd gotten out of the shower and was getting dressed. And as I came out, she was standing by the bed and she wasn't moving. And she was just quietly standing there. And I said, I said her name a few times. I'm not going to say it now because she's literally 3 feet away from me in Jackie's recliner sleeping. But she wouldn't move. And I called Jackie and I said, hey, there's something wrong with her. Can you come in here? So she came in, and the poor thing was standing and favoring her right leg. And she wouldn't move, and she wouldn't talk, and she wouldn't eat, and she wouldn't drink, and she didn't want to go outside and all this type of thing. Well, we got really worried about her. Within a couple days, maybe it was a Charlie horse or what have you, or she slid into a wall running too quickly here. We don't have carpeting, we have laminate flooring. Or maybe she slipped on snow outside and hurt herself. But my right leg, I'm practically dragging it behind me. She's favoring her right leg. And then Jackie is having problems with her right foot. So all this, like within a 2-week time span, happens to our right legs and right foot, which just is pretty trippy.
She wasn't favoring her right leg. She was limping on her leg.
One more thing, going back for a sec. When I mentioned that Sasquatch house in Alaska, people would say, well, why would some guys make that up? Well, because now they can rent that Airbnb as a Sasquatch encounter house.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And there's thousands of people that would pay to do that.
Well, why in heaven's name would anybody want to rent a room in the Low Hotel when you can go across the river and stay in comfort? It's because it's allegedly haunted.
I don't think it's allegedly. I think it is.
Well, it's been described to us by people that we know
It
as
is
being haunted. I'm not disputing that. I'm not disputing it. I'm just saying I don't want to stay there either.
Jeff, there was a tricycle noise, there was a squeaking noise in the hallway, remember?
Yeah.
Oh, and Andy's seen the shimmering beings there, right? Or something of that nature. Our keel voices.
I heard voices, and Harriet saw 3 shimmering beings.
Yeah.
And now we've got the Shining Twins over there. That's pretty cool. How'd the Shining Twins come over to the Low?
I'm staying in the hotel in Gallipolis. I'm not spending the night there.
Well, I've stayed in the Low, and the thing that I wondered about was why in the winter, like the window wouldn't close, or it still had the air conditioner in it with big holes open. And so
Good question.
It was like 10 degrees outside and the room was like 38.
I think I need to take a break for station identification. Is that acceptable?
Yeah, this would be a good time for me to talk about. I would insert some things here while you're doing this.
I'll be right back.
Now, as you're going over there, I could talk about John Tenney, the win a date with John Tenney thing. I don't know, Jackie might have something to say. Like, this would be a good time to any of those funny pictures. Like, there was one of a lady who was recently on Khalil's show, and when you saw the thumbnail on his wall, it looked like this really beautiful young woman. It's like, wow, who's that? And so I go over there and to look at the show, and she must have chosen a photo from like when she was 20.
Oh God!
I'm like, that woman just bears very little resemblance.
It's filters, Andy. So many people use filters. It's ridiculous.
Oh, well, this was beyond. I don't know how she did it. It was fuzzy though. It was definitely fuzzy.
Well, that's a filter. The focus and everything. It's what filters do to pictures.
Look at this.
Just a filter. Now, this is who you should worry about.
I have some collected photos of things that I could stick in here. I could stick in Mothman in Hollywood. Have you seen Mothman in Hollywood signs?
Not yet.
The one about Tim Beckley's porn empire. How do you change? That's the Vegetable Man.
That is Vegetable Man. I've seen him on Amazon.
I could also put up a picture of the Squonk festival. We're having a Squonk festival. This is where I'd give some news. We got the Squonk Festival in Pennsylvania. We got the Contact in the Desert with the spooks. All of your spooks will be there from A to Z. What else can we promote? there's, I think Tobias had a shot of his altar or something.
So what I'd like to know is how are we going to promote a date with Andy Colvin? How are we going to do that? I don't think Lisa's going to let you get away with that.
Well, it could be that she's biased or something, and isn't her, maybe her opinion isn't of my looks isn't entirely objective. Could be, right?
Could be. I don't know.
How the person you're in love with seems the most beautiful. I don't know. I'm just trying to be humble, and I'm not doing a good job of it.
You're not fooling anybody.
But what was the question? Was there a question?
I'm just wondering how we're going to do a date with Andy Colvin thing. How is that going to fly?
Oh, right,
Like the John Tenney thing.
My God, where would we go?
I don't know. You got a nice breakfast place there we all went to last year or the end of 21.
I think it'd have to be a hot dog joint.
Well, there you go. I mean, get him a slaw dog.
The best slaw dogs in West Virginia are right across the street from my brother's house.
There you go.
Will Lisa have a problem with that or no? She doesn't give a shit.
Her. Oh, that'd be funny. I'll bring it up.
She seems to have a pretty good sense of humor, but I don't think your leash is that long.
She'll shoot it down in amazing fashion. She's got a way of neutralizing subject matter with just a click.
Yep. Yeah. Now that I'm not under the influence of narcotics anymore, I keep my mouth a little bit more tame.
If you want to, we don't have much time left, but I thought, if you want to talk about your current events, we've got the East Palestine train derailment, which would fall under our conspiracy category, and balloons. The balloons being seen could be conspiracy, could be UFO, but not really. I did hear, I made up that joke meme that it was really an alien ship that we shot down, and it actually caught on.
Go figure.
That went somewhere.
Because people want to believe in the sensational.
So stupid.
Interestingly enough, our friend Linda Lane, who you met with us the night before the Mothman Festival, had posted something on Facebook last weekend with respect to those balloons. And she was talking about the balloons that the Japanese sent over here during World War II that Keel had written about, which I think he called Fugo balloons, right?
Yep. The old Fugo balloons.
So she was talking about the precedent that was set back in the 40s.
Well, the balloon topic. The first thing I thought of was the balloons of the 1890s, which I think some of them were dirigibles used by the chemical companies to locate sites for plants. I think that's why you saw them where you saw them. They put carbide plants in jungles and fjords and all over the place. And I'm sure other companies did too. But the balloons, can be used to divert attention, I think what they did with that is they with the 1890s things is they blew them up and they totally sensationalized them, as you've said, to where the real ones became indistinguishable from the fake ones.
Mm-hmm.
So you could just muddy the waters.
This one too.
Oh yeah.
I followed a Chinese balloon for almost 200 miles, only to eventually realize it was bird poop on my windshield.
Nice. Nice.
Well, what I wanted to say about the East Palestine thing was Obama had put in a rule that would have regulated the brakes on these trains. And he got it passed, and then Trump reversed it. Trump reversed the law that would have prevented that accident.
Mm.
And then the Republican governor or somebody decided that it was best, and I heard it on the news, controlled situation. They said they found a way to detonate it in a controlled. So they exploded it on purpose. Like, I guess, why? Did they decide that the leakage in the water? Well, actually, a lot of it comes out as gas. So because they used to do this in Charleston. They have these vinyl fluoride leaks. So it's a gas that you don't want to breathe. I don't know what they were thinking. Well, I guess they're thinking that gets rid of it, but now you've spread dioxin everywhere. They keep showing this map, and it shows Columbus and other places way off the map, Charleston. They're all in this watershed. Well, that's if you think about the water flowing toward the Ohio. Is the poison going to go backwards upstreams? Is that what they're saying? Can it do that?
That doesn't make any sense, does it?
No.
I mean, it could leach down and maybe leach out. It's almost like they're scaring people too much on that part of it. But it may be accurate insofar as the air is concerned. All those areas are going to get that smoke, including me. So was I correct in hearing you say you received a free copy of The Rebirth of Pan in the mail, just out of nowhere? Did I hear you say that?
It just materialized. It just materialized. Yeah.
Yeah. You can say whatever you want to say or don't want to say about that. But that's interesting.
I haven't read it. I can tell you that much.
It's interesting that people are receiving free copies of The Rebirth of Pan in the mail.
Amanda Raber received one.
She told me that the Breedloves, Steve Ward is saying that the Breedloves have a restraining order out on me. Did I mention that last time? I don't know if I did. That's how ridiculous the stories are.
Well, and that was something I think that I saw on social media several years ago.
About that?
Yeah, it seems
like I think
even before we knew you.
Oh my God! What? The Breedloves weren't even around, were they?
Well, this is probably because this is 2023 now, and we met you in what, 2019 or 20? When was it? 2020.
20.
So it seems to me, because you and I had corresponded just a little bit prior to that, but not much. And I had seen that there was some type of dialogue between the two of you, and it was contentious. I saw that. And it seemed to me that I had been aware that at least that was said way back then. And I'm not sure who said that. That was the earliest I was exposed to that.
Well,
the only people that we knew in Point Pleasant by that point would have been Jeff Wamsley, who it never would have come from, would have been Carolyn Harris, who we only got to see that first year, and Mark Griffith, who could care less and isn't connected to any of that. I just picked it up on social media.
For the record, about that event, they were going to use some of my footage. I therefore was part of the team. I said, hey, your trailer has something wrong in it. You need to say the Mothman went in this direction, not that direction. And they were really thin-skinned and got their backs up right away and started it. I did not start that argument other than saying you should fix this.
I think that when one has a directive in mind and a goal they're looking to accomplish, depending upon how open-minded they are, how set they are upon the course they've chosen, they're either going to see that as an affront or as valuable input. And I can go back to 2016, 17 with a different group of people talking about a similar phenomenon that wanted absolutely nothing to do with anything contrary to their mission to get their books published before the 50th anniversary of the Silver Bridge collapse. And when things were brought to their attention, not by me or not by Jackie or any of us, but by somebody else that we know, that once again was rooted in the scientific method and had empirical evidence to back it up, and really experts in all types of fields to support that some of the assertions that were made in these books that were ready to be published were totally bogus. They wanted nothing to do with it, and they basically humiliated the guy who was trying to bring this to their attention, first in an effort to collaborate with them and to help them, but because their directive was to publish whatever they wanted to do by a certain time, they took that as offensive and turned this guy into the enemy.
And who was that?
That would be our friend Sam Moranto.
Oh, he was demonized by a group.
Absolutely.
Bias, Lon, At least Tobias in his book, right? He
Both of
literally
them.
mentioned him by
He
name.
mentions him by name, but he goes to great lengths to not make it look like he's really attacking him. You have to know the situation to really understand what was going on there, because he doesn't directly attack Sam, but in knowing Sam and in just watching this whole thing play out as it has, that's the only conclusion I come to, is that he was
He's done
going to
other
stand in the way.
asshole things too. He's done other asshole things, subtle asshole things, because literally one of the Mothman sightings, Sam has proven without a doubt that it was not a Mothman, that it was a kite, a gala kite, a Felix the cat. And Sam was supposed to be at some paranormal conference in Wisconsin, I think.
That's the Indian statue one.
Yeah, that
And-
was the sighting that had taken place on the day that you had done your coast to coast appearance and really had Mothman out in the public consciousness. That picture was snapped, within hours of when you
Right.
were on.
And then Tobias literally posts within like a day before the paranormal conference, probably once he realized that Sam was presenting there, he posts that he needs a couple kite flyers to stand out where people are coming in so they can fly kites. Only, I'm sure, to prove that Sam's findings were incorrect, that you can obviously tell what a kite is.
But once again, we have a whole in-group, out-group thing going on. I mean, they've done a really good job. And granted, I'm going to tell you, and you know this too, Andy, because I know you've made the comments. He's done a fantastic job of marketing his product. He's got a wonderful website. He's got a large group of followers. He's got books that are published, and he's out there in the mainstream wearing the crypto hat now, just like his icons.
On false information, though.
Based upon false information and complete nonsense. But it becomes in-group, out-group, where our friend Sam has been demonized because he's trying to bring some type of empirical evidence into a situation where it's not wanted.
Scientific methodology. He uses scientific methodology to prove what it is not. And he gets shot down for doing that.
With doctoral level researchers, and take me out of the mix. He's got others that are in there that have been really close to this case, that have sat down and analyzed photographs and such and come to the conclusion. Even the Gala Kite Company tells them that's our kite. It is our kite.
Right. Well, let me try to summarize what you've just said again for the listeners, so they'll know about the Chicago Mothman. Basically, the idea here is Lauren Coleman has this thing about me. He doesn't want me to do well. I was on Coast to Coast. He took me off of Wikipedia while I was on the show. I couldn't get back on there. Next day, this sighting shows up and starts the whole Chicago Mothman thing, which runs for 10 years. And then during that time, Lauren is all over TV promoting the story. And Lauren probably was somehow involved in organizing the stories or something that went to these three guys, Tobias, Alon Strickler, and Manuel Navarrete, and a couple to MUFON. But they obviously were hoaxed, and it all sort of ended up benefiting Lauren. So we kind of have Lauren as our ringleader, and he's definitely promoting both Seth and Small Town Monsters and the Newkirk's Hellier series. He's definitely they're pictured with him mugging years ago, and they both came out with a similar approach at the same time. I always check them out and try to integrate, try to communicate with them to see what kind of responses I get. And they're pretty much pre-programmed. No matter what I say, it's not gonna work out. So I think no matter what I had said to the Breedloves about anything, it would have ended up there. I don't think I had anything to do with that.
Yeah, I don't mean to cut you off.
And the same with the Helliers, instant problem. It came a little later, but because they're a little more open-minded, but I think ultimately I don't know what they think. They're attempting to do some work here on Indrid Cole, and they've already done a movie about him or two and made quite a bit of money from that. And they want to do another one, and they're not allowing me to post on their thing. Did I already say this? But I'm the person with the rights to Indrid Cold story. So when they put a call out recently for Intercold to contact them and that they would show him Hellier, I said, I am Intercold. I am his representative. I am the guy who owns the rights to that book. Send me Hellier 3 so that we can figure out whether or not you're going to be stepping over the line and using my material or the material that I have the rights to at the present time. The Visitors from Laniello's book. It was the same with Amy Bruni and those ghost hunters. Same thing. I'm very negative. She was spreading a bunch of ridiculous stuff about me a long time ago, right when she was just trying to get ghost hunters started, or ghost whatever it was. I guess she figured I might be the candidate to host the show or something. And so she went on one of those campaigns like Steve, we're just making up stuff and spreading it. So it's been gone on since for 20 years, you know. What about pre-programmed responses once this group dynamic's been set up? Or the dog whistling. Here's what I think, and we can go a little over. Here's what scared me about the Seth thing, was it turned into a dog whistling event where I think they probably realized what was the power that they had in that moment. Simply by arguing with me, their followers started attacking me, and eventually I got death threats. And so if you're a star, you know, and you've got a group of people out there that would do that for you, that's powerful stuff. That's like Trump. You know, people would go murder for you or beat somebody up for you. I mean, this guy said he would kill me. He was going to drag me behind his truck. So what about the dog whistling?
You know, that calls to mind for me, and I know I've shared this with Jackie recently as well, that I was at an Ozfest back in 1997. And I've been a heavy metal fan for most of my life, and was at the show because I wanted to see Ozzy, basically. And before Ozzy came on, two bands prior to him was Pantera, who was really all the rage in that community back then, in the late 90s, early 90s, mid 90s, really through the 90s, I suppose, and even into the early 2000s. But I'd never been at a show that was intense as that was, you know, and I'd seen bands like Black Sabbath and Slayer and King Diamond and things like that. But I'd never seen a crowd that was so in sync with that band that I felt like I was at some type of a Hitler era World War II Nazi rally. That, I mean, there were things going on. People were shaking their fists in unison, chanting on a dime. Not to be trite, Dimebag Darrell was their guitar player, and I was never a fan. Don't get me wrong. I didn't care for their brand of music. I've never seen a band have such control over their fandom as Pantera had. And what you're describing to me sounds kind of similar to that. It's really pretty scary. And I don't have any axe to grind with anybody in the paranormal field except for the Chicago group, because the Chicago group really offends me at a level that I don't know that I can even really describe. But some of the stuff that's going on out there, it's just entertainment. It does cross the line. When people are getting threatened, there's nothing good about that. There's nothing righteous about that. It's just flat out wrong.
I think that's the thing that pisses me off about Seth Breedlove too, because we watched his movies, shows, thinking that there was meaning behind all of it, that he cared about his work. And then after watching what he did with On the Trail of the Lake Michigan Mothman, after watching what he did to Sam and to you and to Jack Chavez, then I realized what was really going on. This guy is only putting out there what he wants out there. He's only putting out there what sells, flat out what sells.
Well, and that was all about,
that was just his credits at the end of it. And the money that's being pushed towards him to put out all of this bullshit just pisses me off.
They call it PDM, paranormal dark money.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was really, I mean, for my piece that I was grateful to be in the show. I mean, it's the first show I've been in. It came to a minute and a half, and I was interviewed for probably 15, 20 minutes. But the challenge that I had was being interrogated by a girl half my age with less credentials than I have, who knows way less about the whole legend than I do. And I realized, I think at that point in time, that things were kind of scripted, although I was a little confused because I'm a pretty idealistic guy, and I really believe people operate with the best of intentions because I do. And when I found out what the final product really was, it was really totally slated towards what the Whalens came up with. It was slated towards some really bad interviews with some really non-credible people. And I'm not saying that they didn't see something. I think some of them probably did, but I was more offended by the fact that they were so invested in the outcome that the guys who really were involved, which wasn't so much me. I mean, I've been an enthusiast really on the sidelines, and I'm more of a researcher than I am an investigator. So I was more concerned that Sam and Jack, especially Sam, who's put so much into this, wasn't necessarily marginalized, but his piece was minimized to the degree that it didn't even really matter at the end. It didn't matter what he found out because that they weren't interested in that, because that isn't what's going to sell. What's going to sell is the mystery, and the mystery is based on bullshit.
You just heard it from a PhD, folks. Now go ahead, Jackie.
I was going to say the best part of that day for me was being at the Congress Hotel during COVID, during a lockdown, and them telling me I couldn't use a restroom after driving over an hour to get there. And they finally decided to let me use the restroom. The chick walks me all the way down the hallway. I go into the bathroom. There's this room, and I kind of like do a look, and the bathrooms are off to the right. So I shoot through the door, go into the bathroom. As I'm going to the bathroom, just getting done, I hear a toilet flush. So I get out and I'm like looking, and there's nobody around. I mean, literally a toilet flushes. I flush my toilet. I walk out. There's nobody around. So I'm thinking, okay, so maybe when I came in on the left side, there were other toilets, because sometimes they have that, like a dressing room or sitting room or whatever in between. There's nothing there. There's nothing there. That was pretty cool.
Literally had a paranormal, you had a poltergeist.
Yeah, I did. And that's a haunted hotel. And, so me, the whole time I'm wanting to have this experience while we're in the hotel room or something. And then it's like, but wait a minute, that happened. It's always that kind of shit that happens, that it's like, it goes right past me, and it's like, wait a minute, that happened.
And I would just like to say that we had a really positive conversation with Heather Mosier. She was wonderful. We had a great conversation with her. I don't have a problem with Seth. I mean, Seth is in the business to make money. Where I had the challenges with,
he did say that Lon Strickler is an asshole.
Pardon me?
And he did say that Lon Strickler is an asshole.
Yeah, so I mean, and I totally agree with that. And I don't care if Jabba the Hutt wants to take it up with me. I'll go toe to toe with him. But honestly, I mean, really, Seth gave me a chance to be in the documentary. I'm grateful for that. He's been nice to me. I'm grateful for that. I think he's doing entertainment. I think it's entertainment. And I don't have a problem with him doing entertainment. But if you're doing research, legitimate research shouldn't be marginalized by the desire to be commercialized. And I think where you've got legitimate researchers like Andy that have devoted their lives to doing what he's done, regardless of whether you like the guy or if you think he's the most hated guy in the paranormal, Andy stands up for himself, and he's not afraid to go toe to toe with people and argue with people. I respect that, because I tend to try to get along with everybody when maybe I shouldn't. But
if you're doing entertainment, then
call it that.
Call it this is entertainment. I mean, let people know that
they don't know.
You've begged it some. Just like Hellier. People did not know, and some people still do not know. We did not know that it was
I loved that series until the last 2 episodes, and I thought, what the hell are they doing?
It was scripted.
We didn't know it was scripted until like months later.
They did a good job of scripting it.
Yes.
Whoa. Give me some extra tape. Need extra tape. I did not know that Hellier was scripted.
Hey, and by the way, Andy, I mean, I think you'd agree with me on this. When we saw Tyler Strand at the Mothman Festival, he was nothing but cool. He really was.
Said he hasn't seen or done anything with those guys, right? The Newkirks since Hellier.
Yeah, big shout out there to Tyler Strand for being an all-around cool guy.
Yep.
He was great.
And
We
I
had a
didn't
lot
get
of
my
fun talking
picture
to him.
taken with him because I didn't have my phone. I had Andy's phone because Andy handed me his phone instead of my phone. And then I
I'm very-
was like, trying to post it on Facebook. And next thing I know, it's like, well, Tyler left and I didn't get my picture.
We're going to get you another picture with Tyler.
All right.
We got to stalk him to find him.
I'm not going to stalk him.
I've actually heard 3 categories mentioned here tonight by Dr. Bill: the researchers, the investigators, and the entertainers. And I guess it would be, researchers at the top of importance, investigators, entertainment. Although in our topsy-turvy world now, the entertainment is more important. It literally.
Well, and I guess, Andy, my whole thing in talking about being a researcher is I'm not trying to distinguish myself versus investigators, because you've got people who are researchers, like I'm a doctoral level researcher. Then you have psychologists who are practitioners who counsel and practice therapy. It's a different type of endeavor. And so I'm not trying to say that that's what the investigators are, but I'm not a boots on the ground guy. I'm the first to tell you that. I like talking to people who have had experiences, interviewing them, and then chronicling what they've had to say and applying the scientific methodology behind it. So I'm not trying to make myself sound better, just different in what I do.
Well,
And I like to be boots on the ground.
now we've got 4 categories. We've got practitioners, because some of these, the New Age ladies in particular, they'll also have a side thing where they're healing, so they're actually being a practitioner. And then they might also say that they're a researcher or something. They're certainly entertainers, although they may not say so. So I'm just trying to get a handle on the 4 categories: practitioners, researchers, investigators, entertainers. Are there more categories? How do you fit practitioner? Do you agree with me that some of these are acting as practitioners too?
Well, I was kind of correlating the differences like between doctoral level folks.
But Andy's got a good point, because I'm a Reiki master. I'm a practitioner.
And you're also an
I
experiencer.
also investigate, and I also do research. So
And we're forgetting the experiencers too. Yeah.
and the experiencers, and I'm an experiencer. So the only thing I'm really not is an entertainer, but I can be quite entertaining at times.
You're very entertaining.
And we've got the contactees who are like super witnesses.
Yeah.
Is there anything to say about all those categories? What do we do with those? Do we try to apply them to people? Do we try to tell the entertainers that they're not really investigators, or do we just let them learn on their own?
I don't know that there's, it kind of comes back to what we talked about, I think, early on in the show, Andy, and that is a matter of, we can do what we can to change ourselves, but when it comes to trying to change other people, we have very little influence and ability to really do that. And so when you were talking earlier on in the show about just kind of sorting things out and working through things, and some of the angst that you have as a result of being maybe the most hated man in the paranormal, which I'm not disputing, that,
Absolutely.
Maybe that's okay, because maybe you're one of the few that's actually doing real legitimate research, and it's a threat to people who are not. Maybe that's okay. I look at Keel, even in your compilations. You, I think in prefaces to some of your books, have written that Keel was not afraid to be the lone dissenting voice in the crowd. Do you remember that?
Vaguely.
I do. I remember it because I've read it and probably listened to it dozens of times. But I think you're kind of that guy. You're not afraid to be that lone dissenting voice in the crowd that's saying, look, this is crap. And I'm going to tell you why it's crap. And then I'm going to prove to you why it's crap. And then you're going to ostracize me because you don't want that to be out there, that's crap.
Excellent wrap up there. Unless anyone else has anything, I'll thank you both, Bill and Jackie Kousoulas, for our first, inaugural Mothy Talk episode. Thank you.
the lungs will buy. This kind of stuff can make you cry. Might make you die.
If you guys want to be on Mothy Talk, you can be my co-host.
I think it'd be a blast. I mean, this is the most fun I've had doing this for a long time.
It's fun to just let it go, like talk about.
Well,
whatever.
and it gets me thinking at a level that I don't really think at until we have these conversations.
Well, and
It
it's
kicks
always
my critical
interesting to
thinker
hear
into
other
gear.
people's perspectives and stuff that they talk about.
Right.
I could talk about the 1962 Mothman sighting in Mound. I don't have much to say about it other than I talked to the witness, but it changes the timeline to 1962 instead of 1966.
Yeah.
Brings in JFK, possibly. I'd like to grab that guy again. He was a very strange guy, mystical type, and figure out if he had ever had any JFK premonitions or anything. I didn't think to ask him.
I think there's lots of stuff you could talk about when it comes to sightings that I mean, I can only talk about the Scarberries and the Millettes and that kind of stuff. You know, you've got stuff in your books I just don't know like you do.
Well, you can talk about your experience too, Andy. with
Yes,
Mothman.
absolutely.
All different
Absolutely.
experiences.
Awesome. This is going to be fun. We'll make it fun.